What up, felines? Welcome back to another great episode of Comedians in Bed. And this is a place where comedians can be comedians. And still don't know what that means. It just sounds like something that you should say on a podcast. As always, I have a great guest here for you. We got a very talented, funny man, not only talented with the words that he used, but he also used them on paper. And we're going to get into that today. He's been everywhere. Been on shows, not just comedy shows, but TV shows as well. I'm so excited that we have him here today. Please, everybody, give it up for the very talented Mike Larsen, everybody.
Hey.
What's going on with you, Mike? How you feeling today?
I am doing great.
Now, let me. You are known as a writer, so I'm going to ask you. I think I'm going to start asking people this. Any artist who writes, did you write today?
I did not type today, but I did write today. I have new bits that I am working on, and every day, if I'm out about, like I went up to, drove up the road a bit to get breakfast burrito, and I brought my bit with me. That's what I do.
Yeah.
I put the idea in my head, and I say, I'm gonna work on this one. So there is that part of writing. I have often gotten. Years ago, I told a girlfriend I couldn't hang out with her because I was writing, and then I went out and played golf, and I explained that writing and typing are not the same thing. That I often and it was true. I really was in my head working on something that I really needed to be alone to work on. But she didn't she didn't take that as a valid excuse.
No, I definitely understand. The thing I hate about writing the most is like when I'm trying to enjoy myself for life, and I'll be like, "Oh, this is funny. I gotta write it down because I know I won't remember it later." So I try to always stay in the moment. But I just always try to quick jot it down real quick. Do you ever just like write just for like the sake of like writing? Like, hey, I'm in the mood to write today. Whatever comes out, comes out. Or is it always like you're writing for like a joke or for like a script?
No, I try to write every day, and when I was solely a comic, I forced myself to write a page of jokes every day. And it was most important on the days I was not inspired. Because the day we think up funny stuff, hey, that's a good day, that's an easy day. It's the other days where it's work.
Yeah.
So I would force myself to write a page of jokes before I got to do anything that I wanted to do, like hang with friends or get breakfast or whatever. So
Yeah. Now I understand that. Sometimes I can get lost in writing. Sometimes I'll do like 30 minutes or whatever, but usually I try to like write for an hour, not just because it's an hour, but just because I have so much fun doing it.
You're right. Are you always working on your act, or you're writing other things?
Right now I am writing on my act. I haven't wrote a script in a while, but after taking the panel with you, I'm committing to doing an outline this month, and then I am committed to doing a script every quarter going forward. So the last quarter of the year and every quarter of the year.
Yeah, and that is where like taking something with me really helped, like working on scripts when I would develop characters. I remember when my kid now is in college, but when they were little and I would like go to the playground or something, if I was working on a script, I would bring a character with me. And so while they were off playing, I would say, what would Karen be doing in this situation? How would she react to that woman yelling at her kid over there, or that bird or whatever? And it really helped me a lot, much more than sitting here at my desk forcing myself to write with my hands on the keys. I would do much better out in the world where people really react to things.
Yeah. And I do agree with that. I think yesterday when I was writing, I wrote in my journal that I needed to go outside more and experience life. This year, I just haven't really. I just been inside a lot, and I think that's what makes. Like sometimes I will put myself in situations just so I can get something out of it. See if there's something that can be written about this. Do you ever find yourself doing that, or which ways do you go out to find material to write about?
I'm very much a visual thinker, so I like to be out places where sometimes it might just be taking a walk, or it might be going out in the yard or playing with the dog. But other times, especially when I was working on the script, I would try to go places where those characters live, not the actual place, but if you're writing, if there's a family with kids, you go to the park, right? While you're seeing kids run around, you are bound to come up with, say, hey, that kid, I like that kid. Or you hear a name, you hear someone yell the kid's name, you're like, oh, that's a good name. I'm going to name my kid's friend that name. Or you just see an interaction. And it's more so, I think, in writing a narrative than it is in stand-up. But yeah, that stuff really helps.
Yeah. I've even gone to some extremes to get to some material. But one of the things that I've been doing ever since we did the panel actually, thank you for being a part of it. It really inspired me. Ever since then, I've just been committed to writing. I was already doing it, but like actually writing out like a joke every day and writing in my journal Monday through Friday just to be consistent and stay consistent with it. One of the things that helps me write.
I knew nothing about when I started doing stand-up until I met people who were comedy writers. I mean, I knew it existed, but I couldn't really wrap my head around how do you even do that, So yeah, no, I was glad they did that. I've heard from a lot of comics who are like, well, it was just good to see that that a comic could make that transition, and that there was I don't have a fancy degree. My father wasn't a studio executive. I had none of that stuff. So
yeah. One of the things I do to find material now is I got it from us. Well, it wasn't explained to me how the class worked, but I went to Mark Gregory's, one of his writing classes, and he just met people every day, like, or when they came to class, like, look up in the news something that happened and to write a joke.
Okay.
So I've been doing that a lot lately, like especially with like the political stuff, like with JD Vance talking about dogs. I'm working on a joke about that. And with Senator George Lang talking about, it's going to take a civil war to save the country. I made a joke about that.
Right. Yeah.
With stuff like that, what's other ways that, or methods that you use to come up with material? And then with these current events that's happening, I've realized that sometimes the joke can only go so far, and then I'll be like, okay, well, when this ends, what other part can I, like, there's got to be a part two. Like, did a civil war happen? What would happen if we had a civil war? So, like, what's some of your
right? Well, my background is politics. So I was involved in politics before I was ever involved in comedy. And I went to college for political science. So my comedy has always come from the news, even though I also talk about other stuff. So that is also often where it would start for me. And the reason why a lot of comics don't do that is you can spend a lot of time on a bit that only lasts a day if it's a news story. especially if you're trying to chase this next dumb thing that Trump says, because tomorrow there will be another thing. And, I would write a great Trump joke and then get it on stage and say, God, it feels so old.
Yeah.
He's already raped somebody or, whatever. And you're like, you're still talking about that,
Yeah.
So that is a danger. And then there's just the issue of, especially when I was starting, there was pretty much just the late night shows that you had to worry about. The Tonight Show, Letterman. So, you do a joke and then Letterman or someone would do it that night. And you go, now there's many, many more shows, but not as many people see them. Mm-hmm. So, if in a topical joke, it's almost guaranteed that someone somewhere on TikTok or Colbert or somewhere thought of a similar joke. Mm-hmm. You can't really, if you spend time worrying about that, you never get anything done.
Yeah.
But outside of topical things, lately I'm really trying to focus, and this is something when I teach classes, I always tell comics, your point of view isn't just what's coming out of your brain. Your point of view is coming out of the person that the audience sees. So I always ask people, what does the audience see when you walk on stage? Do they see a nice person? Do they see, and is that what you want? Do they see someone attractive? For women, it's hard because like a beautiful woman doing comedy has so many other things to deal with because the women are kind of not like her and the guys just want to get with her or whatever. And it's like, hell, I just want to tell you my jokes, man, So it's really important. And for me, only recently have I wrapped my head around the fact that I'm almost always the oldest guy on the show.
Yeah.
And often by a lot, by 20, 30 years. So I'm trying to write to that. And for years, I have not. I think I didn't want to tell people I was old, like they might not know if I don't say it or something, So
right.
Lately, I've really been thinking about what is unique to me. The great thing for a comic about writing what's unique to you is that you kind of become theft proof. People can take my joke, but they can't do Mike Larsen better than me. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm true to myself, even if they feel the joke, it's not going to be, the same.
What are the signs? Like when sometimes I see you at open mics for shows. What are the signs of like a good writer? Like what's one of the things that make you be like, oh, that person's good at writing?
In stand-up, in stand-up, I look for people who are, again, talking from their soul. What are they saying that's different? That very often in stand-up, especially at a mic, you're going to go on. You might go on. You might be the fifth, black guy in their 20s or whatever. It used to be I would be, one of 30 skinny young white guys going up one at a time, and it's like, why would the audience remember me? But I'm also looking for something that isn't the obvious joke or the easy joke. That's fine, getting an easy laugh. Those are great every now and then. But when you see someone either take a risk, when they're clearly have made an effort to, you know, kind of fight the power and not punch down. You know, what I really like is when someone takes a premise that could easily be punching down, but then they don't. You know, you have something to say about, you know, trans kids, but the joke is ultimately about the religious right or something. Or you have a joke to say about women, but the joke is about how you yourself need to do better or something, you know? That's for me where I know that somebody maybe started. The first joke that hit them might have been the easy one, but then they worked it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I don't know. As me being black, I kind of, I'm not gonna say it's not too many, but I've just realized. I think when I started to study, I think it was last year, the year before that, I started studying Def Comedy Jam and just watching all the episodes and just seeing like what was funny back then, what worked back then, what was their style, stuff like that. And so I think with if you get a comic that's has like similar backgrounds to you, you can kind of find yourself saying the same things. So I just kind of I do think just try to think outside the box. Like right now I'm working on a bit where I am talking about handicapped people from the standpoint of NFL players have better helmets than what they have. And the joke is kind of like advocating for like them to have better helmets than NFL players because they go through more things. What is like another way to like think outside the box as a writer? Because we all see the same things. We kind of all may experience the same things. So what's another way to think outside the box?
Well, I like to start when I'm writing with what's the obvious joke. I do in my joke writing class, we always start with bad jokes. I give everyone a prompt and I say, you've got 2 minutes. I want you to write the most obvious joke you can think of here. And the only thing I say is that it needs to have a surprise ending. That's the thing that makes it a joke. And by getting that out, sometimes it really kicks you off thinking that's the joke the audience expects. Good. We should know that. Now, let's surprise them by giving them something they don't expect. So for me, I started in doing improv back like in high school and college, and I had a really great improv teacher who told us that when you're in like the back line and you're getting ready to go into a scene, you got to be running possibilities in your head, and I want you to do the third one you think of. The first one is going to be, it might be great, but let it go. The second one, I want you to get to that third idea just and I've liked doing that, like when I talk to the audience on stage too. You know, very often whatever they say to me, I repeat what they say, partly so everyone in the audience knows what I'm talking about. But also it's buying me time to get to that more surprising response than just the first thing I think of. And it takes a little bit of patience. But in my joke writing too, I find that if I write stuff down on paper, even if I've been out thinking of stuff and then I come home and I type it or write it on a pad, that whatever I write, I try to go, okay, let's do that again now. What's the second version of that? What's the third version of that? And almost always I find something at least 10% better. Maybe it's the same joke, but it's used in a more interesting word or a different structure or something.
Yeah.
And it's the difference between a writer and someone who just goes with what they got. And sometimes what we got is great. But the other thing is, if you do your second, third, fourth version and they're not as good as the first, cool, go do you the first. It doesn't hurt you to have that extra stuff, you know.
Yeah. Now you don't also you also when you do comedy, but you also write for TV, and I'll always try to tell people. I think it may be just because of my background and what I have. So I used to be a news and sports reporter for local TV, and when I was and when I was interning here at Channel 10, one of the anchors, she was just like, it would be best if you learn to do everything. It'll make you more marketable. And so I kind of just took that whole mindset and brought it here with me in comedy and with my experience with acting. To always just tell comics to just try everything, do improv, do acting, write scripts, all that type of stuff. So how because comedy alone, I mean, it's good money eventually when you start to make it or whatever, but it's not sufficient from my eyes. So what other ways can comics make money through their writing?
Well, right. We tend to think when we're comics that we have this stupid skill that other than telling jokes in bars, it's not very marketable, right? And for some people, it's not, but in my career, I worked on Capitol Hill for a congresswoman. Well into my career, I was in my 40s when she asked me to come, and I quit my job in television and went and did that. And I was scared to death that I was going to kill her career. I was going to say some smart-ass thing, and occasionally I messed up a little bit. But it was really important to me to show me that those skills are transferable. Next week, I'm starting a job at Ohio State writing speeches for the Alumni Association. They approached me. I've written a lot of speeches in my life, and they asked if I would come do this. I love doing that. Writing's writing. It's a blast. And especially a thing like speeches are very similar to stand-up, even if they're not funny. It's rhythm, it's stay into your time. And whether you are writing with the goal of getting an audience to laugh or with the goal of getting them to think or to get choked up or whatever, it's the same kind of magic trick. It's the manipulating people with your words that I find really interesting. And I love doing it for other people. I find it very freeing to write for other people because it takes the critic away from me. I just write it, and then they decide whether it's good or not. Whereas when I write for myself, it's very hard to get the critic out of the picture who's saying, nah, I wouldn't do that, or that's hack, or so. But to your point of learn to do everything, just the odds of anyone ever making a nickel in show business are huge. It's not a rational way of making a living. It's not, and you don't know what jobs are going to be available. So you got to know everything. You got to, or at least pretend you know everything and be a quick study, So one, as a comedy writer, I've written for kids shows. I wrote for Whoopi Goldberg, wrote for Reba McEntire, Reba and Whoopi are nothing like me. I do not have much in common with either of those people, but they loved me as a writer. And I brought my thing to them, and you really do have to kind of get out of your little pigeonhole, as a comic where we talk about one thing, and kind of embrace the chaos of writing for something nothing about. I like people. Every writing class in the world, they say, write what you know, and it always kind of makes me bristle. It's like, it's no career. Who are you writing for? Your mom? No. Write what scared you. Write that what you know nothing about, because especially if the audience knows nothing about it, you're probably going to ask the right questions. Right? They're going to say, gee, I wonder what a person like Whoopi Goldberg would do in this situation. I don't know. I take a whack at it and I write what I think is funny. And she's never shy about telling me when I was wrong. She'll tell you if you don't get it. All right, cool. How about this then? If you can learn to write jokes, even when you're not feeling funny, then you can write anything, because they're just short stories with a surprise ending. That's all a joke is. And so if you can do that on any topic, under any circumstance, that can be expanded to write drama or speeches or anything, TV commercials, whatever you want to write.
What did what writer's room grew you as a writer the most? The reason why I asked that is because you've been in several different writers' rooms. You've worked with a myriad of different artists. So what writer room grew you the most as a writer?
Well, I mean, the first one was huge to me because I worked on a show called Grace Under Fire, which was the first show that Chuck Lorre created. And it was a top 10 show at the time. And, he went on to do, 2.5 Men, Big Bang, a million other great shows. And I went in there after having been told by other people that I could never make it in a writer's room because I was too much of a comic. I had a short attention span. I couldn't do the long hours, whatever. It's silly now when I think about it, but at the time I believed it when I got in that room. And within an hour in that room, I was like, oh my God, I have found my place. This is where I belong. But also within that room, there were 4 or 5 really funny writers who came to it from stand-up comedy. And they were people I knew from stand-up comedy. And they were great role models. And with comics, there's only one way to impress a comic. You make us laugh. Make me laugh. I don't care about whatever you're bringing me, telling me, blah, blah, I did this show. Make me laugh. That's all I care about. And in a writer's room, when there's other very funny, high-level professional comedy writers, and you're the new kid, and in the first half hour, I got the table laughing, I was immediately in. Mm-hmm. And there were 2 other staff writers. They call you baby writers your first year on a show. There were 2 other baby writers. And I didn't look at them as my competition, but I was certainly well aware that I was getting laughs when they were still sitting quiet in their corner of the table. I was very aware that I had made myself known. like the rookie who comes up and gets a hit in his first at bat in a baseball game. The team's like, all right. I was in some incredible writers' rooms, and when you're really in a room with a lot of really, really funny people, to see all these people firing on all cylinders, but also all knowing how to read this room. I mean, these are tough rooms to read. When do you pipe up? Where in my hierarchy as a baby writer, I'm at the very bottom. So, I don't interrupt that guy. I don't interrupt her. I wait for my spot, but I make sure that when I interrupt, it's gold. I don't, the higher level people can say, what about something like this? They don't even have it. That's fine. I'm there to deliver gold.
Yeah.
And sometimes if one thing I always tell people to do, and in fact, when I was running room, I would always make sure the baby rider sat next to a vet, someone who you could say, not to the whole room, but say, hey, is this funny? What about this? What are they talking about? So there's a lot of on TV shows, it's just kind of like a lot of lingo that gets thrown around that comedy writers use that you just don't know until you're there.
Yeah.
And it was really helpful for me to have someone say, what does that mean? There's a term that you throw around. People say house number. It doesn't really make sense. So the house number among comedy writers means this joke doesn't actually fit, but I think it's kind of in the area we want. And so people were throwing around house numbers of what does that mean? A good writer's room is the happiest place on earth for me. Fitting with really smart, really funny people who are both delivering on the script, but also giving each other shit constantly. And no one's getting their feelings hurt because we're all that have wired the same way. Is the best. A bad writer's room is when there's one or two people like me who are there to be funny, and everybody else is there for some other reason. And I've been on those shows where they're there because their dad's running the show, or because they have the same agent as the good writer, or because maybe they're good on story, but they're not joke people. That can be death, because you just feel like if I don't come up with it, we're going to be here all night.
Yeah. Growing up, I don't know what it was about me, but I think he was moving, or was he just? I think he might have moved. Yeah, I think he moved. My dad, he had moved to Atlanta, and he gave me like a project to do. He was like, "I want you to read this book." It was not an appropriate book for me to read. It was a book about Tupac being in jail, and he had met this pen pal, and they was exchanging letters or whatever. And then he made me read like this magazine, I think, or like some type of other book that was about Tupac, and he made me write about it. And I don't know why.
And how old were you?
Huh?
How old were you at the time?
I was somewhere between 9 and 11.
All right.
9 and 11. And I don't know what made him do that, but I feel like that's what like birthed the writer in me, because when I would read these poems, like I knew Tupac to be like a rapper and stuff, but I'm reading these poems, I'm like, bro, these are like some nice poems, you know what I'm saying? And then from there, I just got in the habit of just writing. It started like with like writing songs, and then from there, from like writing poetry into like, just saying out loud to my friends, I'm gonna write that one joke. I'm gonna write that one day in a movie or put in a joke. Then I finally started doing writing, as a screenwriter and a comedian, and I started to write those things out. But I don't know what it was about my dad that made him. I don't know if he was just being a dad and say, "Hey, here's something to do," or if he was like, he's a writer. So, and maybe it was reading the book that made me know I was a writer, or I think just writing the book report is what made me know that I was a writer. Because then after that, I was writing love letters like every week. So, my question
but
is,
even giving you something that doesn't feel like schoolwork. I could see that certainly as a dad that, my kid isn't going to read the thing the teachers are telling him to read. I'm going to, make him, because, not even kids. We all like feeling like we're getting away with something, and we're being rebellious. I've done writing workshops in when I was in California. I did one every couple of months at San Quentin prison with the guys there, and it was really great because in some of the classes that they do, and the classes are great, but in some of the classes they kind of have to be careful about what they say. They're afraid that might get reported back. Sometimes there's one of the COs kind of watching and stuff. And I always, begged the guards to please not be in the room for the workshops because it's comedy and we just got to let it go. And I felt, say, for one thing, in order for those guys to get in a workshop like that, they have lived many years in a exemplary life in order to just get into a class. I wasn't afraid, but also most of the guys there had my back. But anyway, once we kind of freed up that they could write whatever they want, man, there was some really good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you, there were a lot of I would say the most overwhelming theme is how fucked up old white guys are, right? So it was, and at first I think they would have been nervous about that, but it's like, this is comedy, right? First off, I'm not your oppressor. I know it's not about me personally, but write it, and write. It's comedy. You can't be censoring yourself at the creation stage. You do that at the editing stage if you have to. But man, there was so many great, really, really inspired stuff written by guys who for that brief moment were allowed to do whatever they want. They weren't going to get in trouble for it. And there were some that were like, yikes, that is really, really scary. But that was great. It was, and it makes me, I mean, every time I teach any class, I go home and write like crazy. It both gets me set again in the basics, but also it inspires me when someone is really honest about something,
My next question is very, very simple, but I am very curious. How in the hell did you survive Hollywood?
Oh, Hollywood is Revenge of the Nerds, man. It's the best. It is everybody there, for the most part. Almost everybody. You have the Nepo babies. That's a whole different group. But the people that I hung out with, they're all the funniest, the prettiest, the whatever from their small town, and they get thrown in the mix there. Early on, I had a group of friends who were also broke like me. There was comics, there was some dancers, there were actors, there were directors. And we were broke together, and we would get together and like play literally penny poker. We would bring like a change from the top of our dresser and just play, just to have something to do. And if somebody booked a day of extra work or something, they bought the beer that Friday, and from that group, I got work. I gave others work once I got something. Hey, Hollywood is not a bad place to be young and broke. If you got to be young and broke somewhere, because there's a lot of young and broke people there. It's expensive as hell to live. But as far as, getting through the day, people know, and again, it's a different world now, but you knew which bars had the happy hour food where maybe you could sneak in and not get a drink and still eat happy hour. People who would, hey, my office is having a pizza party, come crash it. We really looked out for each other. And you get a lot of that in Hollywood. People like to think of it as this cold-hearted, mean place.
Mm-hmm.
I don't find that at all. There are assholes everywhere. For the most part, it's creative people who love other creative people and want to see them succeed. And you learn something, you can't wait to share it with your buddy who doesn't have a commercial agent yet. And I went on my first commercial audition. I can't wait to share what I learned. But I tell you, it's tougher when you have success. Because once you have success, you feel like you can't let it die. It's got to keep moving. It's got to grow. And of course, then if you get to a point where, you have a mortgage or a family, you really feel that. And as a television writer, all of the jobs were given out at the end of May. The hiring season was kind of around Memorial Day weekend. And so you would do your interviews in April, early part of May, and then you'd wait by the phone. Memorial Day always kind of sucks. That's also my birthday is around then. So it was always like my birthday was almost always I'm waiting to hear. And the phone would ring and is it my agent? And as a television writer, you're talking about the difference between making 6 figures or 0. It's never like, you're either going to get a really good job or you're not going to work this year. So the stakes are very high. And all of your friends are going through the same thing. So when you get really good news, you don't know who you can share it with because very often I was in competition with them for the gig. There were more times I think when me and a friend were both waiting for the call, and it's like, shit, like I want it to be me, of course, and I'll be happy for them, but so that part is brutal,
Mm-hmm.
but it beats working for a living. For me anyway. Other people want stability. That's cool. I get that. That's not what I was looking for. I wanted to live my adventure, and I wanted to, I'm not a big work ethic kind of. I work hard at what I do, but I have a pretty short attention span. I need to be entertained. So I loved the fact that it was a bit of a lottery, and it's similar to, even more so, it would be like for professional athletes. Think of like an NBA player. There are only a few NBA players. Each team has 14, and then maybe there's some in the G League, but and these guys have been the best at what they did their entire life. In college, they were heroes, and you never get to play in the NBA. And yet they still put themselves out there because if I got a shot, I got to take it. And that's kind of how I always felt. Even on the years where you didn't work, it was like, well, it sucks, but this is the life I'm in,
It brings me to my next question. I feel like with my generation, well, this generation that we're in now, it's a little bit more easier to just be like, I'm not working a 9 to 5. I had heard a stat where they were like 18 to 24-year-olds. They're the most unemployed that Americans have ever been. I was like, that's kind of astonishing. But then I had to think about it. I was like, there's really no more malls, and that's pretty much where they work at. And pretty much everybody has the opportunity to work for themselves. You could do Uber, you could do Instacart, or you could do like content creation. And I feel like this generation has it easier to just go work for themselves. With your generation and with my generation coming up, it was get a 9 to 5, retire, get a good job, all that type of stuff. How did you stay the course of fighting for your dream? Even if you did have to have a 9 to 5 at a period of time, like how did you fight through like the critics of saying you should get a real job?
Oh, I still get that. Yeah. I know what I want to, I know who I am. I know I'm, for one thing, I am not a capitalist. I love having money. Don't get me wrong. I would like to have it rather than not have it, but I've never been driven by it. I have had years where I did really, really well, and it was awesome. You know, I went on nicer vacations. I had a sports car, you know, whatever. Got to put money away, whatever. But I was never driven by that. I've always been driven by my next adventure. But what do I want to do? That I know, and part of this is, you know, I've been around thinking back. I mean, I don't know, you know, when I was, you know, 28 and broke, if someone came and said, here's a job that pays $70,000 a year, but you'll have it for 50 years, I might have taken it. I don't know. I might have said, yeah, I could get a car loan and maybe buy a little house somewhere someday, you know what, but whatever. I really take to heart, you hear people who are, you know, on their deathbed and they say, oh, I wish I had more fun. I wish I didn't spend so much time at the office and all that. I've always taken that to heart. You don't know how long you got. You know, obviously when you have kids and stuff like that, you gotta keep them in clothes and keep them safe and, you know, all of that, obviously. But it's always been about setting myself up to do the best work. And I know that the best work for me has got to be interesting. I'm just not good doing what everybody else does. God bless people who want to do it. I remember laying in bed once and saying, God, I'd give anything to be one of those guys who just wants to fix cars. You know, his job is fixing cars, and on the weekends he fixes his buddy's cars. And when he sees a car broken down on the side of the road, he stops and fixes that car. That's all they want. That's what makes them happy. I would have loved to have done that, but I didn't. I'm not that guy. I'm the guy who loves to write jokes, and those jobs are harder to come by. But I'm not. It is what it is. That's what I'm good at. And also, kind of what I said in the panel. Why I also discovered early on that while I'm good at it, I'm not that good at it. I can always be better at it. And I had a lot of learning to do, and I would run into people who were better at it than me, or at least knew a little more than I did. I was not one of these, and you know, comics are such whiners. Say, oh, that guy, blah, 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 you know, they're so lucky they got this thing, or my audition, somebody talked during my set, whatever, you know. I got to get better. It was always on me. I got to get better than that guy. I'm going to figure out what makes them work, and I'm going to figure out how to make that work for me. I'm just going to get better at everything. Even now, especially live entertainment, right? It is a totally different world now than it was when I was coming up. The comedy world, when I was coming up, you MC, you did a mic that you got good enough to be the MC on a weekend show. After you did that 8 or 10 times, if you were good, they moved you up to the feature spot. And then you did that 3 or 4 times. And if you really killed and you made the wait staff and the bartender laugh, they told the owner, and maybe you got the headline or co-headline, or it was very merit-based. It's not anymore. I mean, you have to have some talent, but it's much more about marketing now, much more about social media. And so for me to be relevant in that world, I needed to market myself in some way. And I'm not really big on social media. I put stuff out. I try to put stuff out, every day, or at least 3-4 times a week if I can. But for me, doing the writing courses was my way of being relevant and filling a need, making myself useful to the people who run the industry in this town, which are young comics. That's the way comedy works. It's run by the talent. And I like doing it. I'm good at it. Make a little bit of pocket money, not very much, but the hustle is probably the most important thing in this business. You just gotta look around you and see what gets me to that next spot. It's just being funny. It's like your college diploma. That's the basic. Yeah, that gives you entry if you're funny, but funny alone isn't worth much.
Yeah. I definitely will take that to heart as I try to get off my 9 to 5 eventually.
What is your 9 to 5? What do you do during the day?
I work at a
Huh?
I work at a bank.
Oh, okay. I worked at a bank for a while when I was starting out in comedy. I was a bank teller for a few years at a Bank of America.
Okay.
And it was soul crushing. It encouraged me to do more to get the hell out of there. But I thank them. I painted houses for a while. Those people and companies who will hire an artist, God bless them, man. We need people who hire actors to wait tables or whatever. They are unsung heroes. We don't give them enough credit. And if I did not have people give me day jobs those first few years of doing comedy, there's no way I'd be here. They were so important to me.
Yeah, that is true. As I start to wrap this up here, I always like to end with the same 3 or 4 questions.
All right.
Mike, who is on your Mount Rushmore for comedy?
Oh, all right. Well, let's see. For the people who always made me laugh, wow, because there's the people early on. George Carlin, this is going to be a weird one. Moms Mabley.
Okay.
Who was, God, I remember seeing as a little kid seeing her on television, and just this old black woman on shows that made this little white boy in the suburbs just pee my pants. She was so funny. And I didn't even get to see her good stuff because she was dirty. I only got to see her clean stuff on TV. She got so many. Oh, Bill Hicks, who I opened for many, many times. And he taught me how to be a comedian, which is basically taught me to be true to myself. He was the one who told me they can't steal Mike Larsen. You got to write Mike Larsen jokes. and let's see, there's 4 people on Mount Rushmore. Someone more, someone who is very current right now, who I think is one of the best, is Nate Bargatze.
Okay.
But as soon as this is over, I'm going to think of other people. Oh God, how did I leave them off? But yeah,
that's how it always works. Mike, what words of encouragement or advice could you give to any comedian that's listening to this right now?
Yeah, write every day. Write every day. You have to write every day. I think I said in the panel, Steph Curry shoots 3-pointers every day, and he's already the best there is. But he still shoots 3-pointers every day. You've got to write every day, and you've got to be honest with yourself. You've really, really got to be honest with yourself. The hardest thing about doing the mics is you get surrounded by the same people, and you can convince yourself that if you're the best person at the mic, that's something, and that's nothing. You've got to be honest with it. Where do you really want to be, and kind of ignore the other talent at the mic. They're not your competition. Your competition doesn't live in Columbus, for one thing. Nobody here is your competition for making a living, or any town for that matter. Nothing against Columbus. And I would say that to another comic. Ty isn't your competition. Your competition is already in Hollywood, and they got an agent. That's your competition. So really be honest with yourself and push yourself. And then the very last thing that is probably the most important, it has got to be fun. If you are not having fun telling jokes for a living, you are doing it wrong, man. If comedy is not the only thing you can see yourself doing, then you can't be doing it. I mean, because it's too hard to make a living. I mean, there are a lot of people who just do it as a hobby, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Just like there's people who play in, rock bands on weekends with their buddies. Nothing wrong with that. But if you think this is something you might want to make a living, it better be the only thing that you can see yourself doing, and that you really have got to love doing it. I always had panic attacks as a kid. I still get them from time to time, and used to get them all the time. And it was many years into comedy that I realized the only time in my life where I am not afraid of having a panic attack is on stage. Even if I'm bombing, even if I am absolutely dying, that's not in my cards. It's just it's just not going to happen there, because that's where I belong. That's my space. And even the worst show on stage is where I belong. It's where I got to take my licks. I don't like it. It hurts, but because that's where I belong. I can't imagine any other place to be.
Yeah, Mike, I ain't gonna lie to you.
Message.
I've had plenty of panic attacks on stage. Nobody knows. Play that off so smooth. Nobody knows. Mike, tell people why they should listen to Comedians in Bed.
Oh, well, I said, Ty, this has been a really fun show. And I watched a couple before I even reached out to you and said, I would do the show if you wanted me. Kind of what I started out early on about being honest with yourself. You're really good at getting people to be honest and not do bits. A lot of podcasts are just bullshit. It's just people doing bits, and I love doing bits. Happily do bits. But talking honestly about the craft, the fact that you have people very different levels. You know, I've been doing it forever. You have people who've been doing it a minute, you know, but it's still the craft. And so it is definitely worthwhile. I would, it's a really, really great glimpse into how the comedy world works.
Mike, tell people where they can find you at. And also, you do a writing class too, so plug that as well.
I do a writing class. We have another one starting this Saturday. This will probably air after it is started. I do these little 4-week sessions at # Comedy Club that they call Write Jokes Like a Pro. That we have everyone from very, very seasoned comedians to people who have no interest in comedy at all. They just thought it was a fun class. And we've demystified the joke writing process. There are things that I learned being a professional comedy writer, which means writing jokes on topics that I have no interest in, on days that I feel horrible. You're sick, had a fight with the wife, hate my boss, hate my job, doesn't matter. You got to write jokes, and you got to be good enough jokes to put on television. And so I learned from people, some I just kind of developed these kind of methods, and that's what we learn. So I always tell people, no matter who you are, you will write an original joke in the first 5 minutes of the class. And everybody who has taken the class, even some comics who come in with the attitude of, I don't need this shit, you know, by the end of the class, they have whole chunks of new material. And you can see people in the cover theme. There are a few people who've taken the class who have made huge leaps in this year. All I did was showed them some ways to write jokes. It's all them. But I know for me, when someone explained how jokes work to me, I went from being the funniest guy at the open mic to being a professional comedian. And I think that's the leap most people want to take. And the class is like 3 hours on a Saturday where all we do is laugh. You know, it is a great way to spend a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
And soon we will have an online version of that too, where it'll still be live, but it'll be done like this, so that you don't have to be in Columbus on a Saturday in order to do it.
That's dope. That's really good. Check out Mike Larsen's class. Hit him up on everything social to hit him up, even if you enjoyed the podcast or enjoyed this episode of him on the podcast. We shoot our live episode every Tuesday at 11 a.m. on my YouTube channel at TYE Comedy. And that's okay if you missed the live stream, because you can go ahead and listen to this podcast wherever you stream podcasts. And then we also put out weekly clips on our YouTube on our Instagram page at Comedians in Bed Podcast. We hope to see you there. Hope to have you guys follow, like, share, and subscribe. I want to thank my man Mike Larsen one more time for coming on here. Mike, thank you. Everyone else, we'll see you guys next week.
Great. Thanks, Ty.